he's got something in the oven he needs to check on. He's coming back to the board and then running away. And so what is it about the London? We've talked about this before, but so this London setup is something that, why are you saying that both players might play this? What is it that's attractive for this in Blitz?
I think chess players are a little lazy. It's easy. You're not going to get a really bad position unless you try really hard. Black equalizes not much else. And I mean, one reason, maybe if someone feels they're a lot stronger in bullet, they might be playing the London because it's a bit of a slower opening. Usually goes pretty late. The games will last longer, which means not as many maybe blitz games will be played rather than, let's say, sharp Sicilian. So there might be something strategical, or it might just be, hey, I don't want to play theory. I do it enough in my classical events, and I just want to make moves that I know are safe and solid.
Well, it's interesting, and of course you touch on one of the things that makes the Speed Chess Championship format different than normal chess tournaments. It's that clock everyone can see there above the analysis board, right? Unlike normal tournaments where really only the moves being played and the time that you have on the clock for yourself matters. In this format, not so. If you fall faster time controls, we start out with 90 minutes of 5-2. Then, of course, we move to 60 minutes of 3-2. And then we will move to a half an hour of bullet. So the scoreboard and the time remaining on the game clock. I wonder if Magnus will ever sit sit tight during this match, getting up and down. So let's touch on this structure here with these double D pawns. Bishop to d6, and talk about these center double D pawns and why they're really not so bad for black because they control all these critical squares.
I mean, it's not so bad because it's just hard for white to make progress. That extra center pawn that will replace the pawn on d5. It's just a very easy approach. One thing you have to watch out for when you have these double pawns in the center for black is if you get ambitious and play e5 yourself, then you could have the two double D pawns as some serious weaknesses if white just lets them stay there. So I expect Magnus to just sit back here really and relax, which it looks like he's doing. Coming away from the board and things like that. But you just wait for white to expand here and
with either c4 or e4, right?
Yeah.
And I guess what you're saying is, that white can't play any of these liberating moves to perhaps open the C file without getting rid of black's biggest weaknesses here on the D file. So makes it a very equal structure. And Hikaru says, I'm willing to go for that, undouble the pawns so I can get the activity of my rooks.
Yeah, there's no other imbalance in the game, so the action is going to take part in the center. But yeah, one reason I said these games might go long is fairly symmetrical structures arise from the London. Yeah, that means you're going to have to work pretty hard to create an imbalance or weakness.
Right, and here the only real battleground that exists currently is the C-file, everybody, on that symmetrical structure note that Eric touched on. It just means that you're likely to see a lot of simplification with just a bunch of trades happening on the only open file. But there is still some long-term life. White has this one overextended A-pawn. If it stays that way, it could be a target. If it gets to A5 at some point, is there an idea that white might try to make some weaknesses, or really that's all just for show right now because this looks like it's headed toward a draw?
I think it's for show, but you're right that A-pawn is something that black could even target at some point, or white has to spend a little bit of extra time to make sure that's always protected, whereas I don't think black has that same issue. All the pawns are conservatively placed and seem pretty okay.
Right.
So, maybe the knight will go to b4 at one point. We'll have to see. Right now, it just seems like mass simplifications, but I don't think either player wants to give up the c-file.
So what's Hikaru thinking about here? One of those rare times where we see Hikaru Nakamura down on the clock, and it shows you the difference with both these guys really flexing their muscles on their way to the finals this year. I don't want to say that neither was not challenged, but they both won pretty handedly to get here in most of their matches. And so on that note, it makes you wonder how Hikaru is going to manage his time against the one player who's really favored against him in a match.
I think when he plays Magnus, he's always tempted to play a little aggressively or expand. Like in this case, e4 was the move to consider. But then he pulls back. Ooh, I like knight b4. Now it is queen takes a4 is a threat here.
The point, everybody, rook takes b4 not possible due to rook takes c1. Pretty obvious there, and you'll see that black will be completely winning. So now Hikaru has to defend a4. He does so indirectly by challenging the knight with the last move, knight d3. Shout out to our last subscriber, by the way. Thanks for all the support. Everybody tuning in all across the globe. Twitch TV, chess.com TV. Thank you for being here. And
is D5 being played in the... Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, D5, the rook.
Look at this. We were predicting a harmless position, and what we've got here is a 2-minute time advantage on the clock for black, and suddenly white having to make a really tough decision. Put my rook on an awkward square and give up the c-file, or sacrifice the a-pawn. How does he do it, right? How does he get life out of such simple positions, even as black? I know I'm asking you to explain genius, but do it.
I'm trying here, but I think he had a good position against Hikaru. When Hikaru's moving backwards in, let's say, symmetrical positions like this, that's not where his strength is. Like,
right.
He just did not know what to do for whatever reason, and he's just worse here with no prospects of any counterplay. How does Magnus get? Well, maybe he's so universal that no matter what you do, at some point, you just have to consistently keep up the same level of chess as he does, and no one has.
Hikaru's shaking his head there. Magnus shaking his head, but for opposite reasons, clearly enjoying whatever he's listening to. And now Hikaru's just down a pawn. Shout out to UK Geek and No Sounds. Thank you for the support. Thanks for the subs. Last 10
this
here.
is
and again,
very
I mean,
unpleasant.
It seems like a simple position that black can now kind of grind away. And
Queen E2, because the knight on D2 doesn't want to move because of knight E4. Otherwise, white needs to pretty much use the queen and the rook to keep protecting that knight.
Yep.
A5, yeah, A5. Maybe put the rook on A8 and start playing B5, A4. Just
so how do you want to defend a position like this? Is it in your interest to move the knight and try to trade the queens?
It wouldn't normally be, but I'm paralyzed, and it's a
Right.
lot easier to, I think, make mistakes if I just can't move.
So he goes for this nice little swish and zug, everybody, to back this thing up on the analysis board. You see that black couldn't take the free knight because the queen was hanging. So nice little tactic there by Hikaru to get a rook ending where black has double pawns, but it doesn't mean that Magnus Carlsen has any less winning chances, honestly.
Yeah. Well, the a-pawn can be stopped, and white's king is close, so it can even be, picked up at some point. It just depends on
interesting decision
what
there,
black's
actually.
can do.
It makes it so that white owns the only open file on the board, and if a3 comes, now rook a2 prevents this rook from ever getting loose without the a-pawn falling. Magnus is going to trade that a-pawn for the b-pawn, no doubt, here in just a minute.
This is bad.
Yeah, now he's going to get the second.
No, he's got the passive king position. I'm not sure why Hikaru played b4 there, by the way. I thought he could just go for the a-pawn, but...
Right.
Still, the issue here is that okay, white's going to put the rook behind the pawn, maybe rook check and rook b8. But white's king position is really not ideal.
Yeah, and often in these types of close to equal
look at the time.
The king activity is really huge. Everybody, even more important in some ways than the extra pawn. Whoever has the more active king in a position like this where white's king is imprisoned on the first rank, it's really a game changer for all of you to note for your own rook endings. This is a huge advantage for black. And now the h-pawn might be weak, so don't be surprised if a flip at some point can happen where the h-pawn falls.
So black plays h4, the big time advantage for Magnus. I mean, unreal to see Naka with 20 seconds to 3.5. But h3 is, he played h4 to maybe h3 is a weakness, more pawns, more winning chances in case he does mess up. Still some work needs to be done though. Let's say white just shuffles king g2, king h2, things like that.
And that's exactly what he should do. Often the best defensive chance here is just not to change too much and make black risk it. But if Magnus takes on d4, the question is, can he get his king in without...
So king g6 or king... Okay, now he's going to bring his king in.
Right, white will bring the rook back to b7. And
king e8. King e8.
So the big issue, everybody, is Magnus is going to bring his king over, and it's a fake prison here because this rook actually has to stay guarding the b-pawn, and that's going to allow the black king to eventually get out. But Magnus is going to have to deal with active defense from Hikaru. g5 is trying to create some sort of crazy counterplay. Honestly, it's likely just desperation at this point, though, with time ticking away on the clock. I don't think Hikaru's holding this.
No. Black's king is getting out here to f5.
And we see our evaluation bar slide almost all the way in black's favor, and with that, Hikaru just